K. Riddle. Sex, female. Age, 15. Primary symptom, fatigue. Diagnosis, well, let's see now.
In the 1960s, the chronic disease rate among Americans was about 6%. By 2006, 54% of children had chronic disease. And this is a devastating pandemic. Of course, the regulatory agencies do not want to look at this issue because the entities that are creating these toxic exposures are politically powerful. You're asking me to not sue drug companies, and I'm not going to agree to that,
drug
Senator.
companies as much as you want.
I'm not going to agree to not sue drug companies or anybody.
I need to enter in the record, these are just 11 letters of support signed by 63,000 people, thousands of doctors. A lot of them are Democrats. They put their political differences aside. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter this in the record. Very early on, I was doing the unofficial whip count for Bobby Kennedy's nomination and confirmation. His nomination was obviously a close call, but there's a huge effort by the pharmaceutical industry, by other interests, to block individuals like Bobby Kennedy. They just don't want people asking the questions. They don't want to know the root cause of chronic illness, because if we find out what it is, or what the factors are, that could disrupt the multi-billion-dollar business models of all kinds of different industries. Whoever funds research gets the results they want. And that's really what Bobby Kennedy has to address, is the corruption and capture of our federal agencies. As he said in his confirmation hearing, he basically has a PhD in corporate capture. He's been suing these government agencies and these big corporations for decades. A lot of people worldwide have had their eyes opened to what's been happening, and they're demanding answers.
Chronic disease accounts for 92% of deaths in this country, and almost nothing is studied at NIH about the etiology of our chronic disease epidemic.
But right now,
the money is going to infectious disease.
But I get your point. It's an interesting point.
The entire emphasis of the medical establishment in the past 20 years has been on infectious disease control. 8% of deaths in the United States are on infectious disease. 92% are on chronic disease. The word chronic disease did not appear in the Biden administration's HHS priority document. The word diabetes did not appear in the entire priority document for the Health and Human Services Department. The word obesity did not appear. If you take a broad view of what's happening to the American people, we are being absolutely destroyed by chronic disease. That has been an absolute blind spot, to the point where senators, when they were questioning Kennedy during his confirmation, said, "Is all you're focused on chronic disease? Is that it?" They literally asked him that. It's 92% of deaths.
It's one of all of these toxic chemicals that all really get their start and take off right in the mid to late 1980s. Right there's about a handful of chemicals that all take off, and at that same moment, we watch the chronic disease epidemic skyrocket. We know we're sick. We know it has to be an environmental toxin because our genes don't mutate that fast. You cannot have a genetic epidemic that happens over the course of 40 years. It doesn't work that way.
The number one reason why most people don't feel well, end up with a diagnosis, is because the amount of toxins that we're accumulating from the womb to the tomb in our tissues.
It's amazing testimony to our resilience that we are all still here. Because if you look at the sheer volume of toxicants we're exposed to throughout the day, even in our air, we are being absolutely poisoned.
The plastics, the lead, aluminum, the mercury, they're finding a teaspoon of plastic in human brains.
It has to be an environmental exposure problem, and Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to put all of those exposures, the ones we eat, the ones we breathe, the ones we drink, we're going to put it out there and say, let the chips fall where they may. And on top of that, take all the databases we're going to use to study and make them available to everyone in the public. So all the scientists from around the world can check that science, can run it themselves and see if it can be repeated. That's the type of science Robert Kennedy Jr. is starting to do.
My name is Jason Karp. I am an entrepreneur and health and wellness advocate. I got extremely sick when I was 23. I was diagnosed with 3 or 4 autoimmune diseases, the worst of which was a degenerative eye disease, and I was going blind at the age of 23. They told me I would be fully blind by the age of 30. There's no cure for this eye disease. And I went on this really bizarre path at the time where I wanted to see if I could heal myself with food and lifestyle. And there wasn't much information out there on how food can indeed be medicine. I studied a number of indigenous peoples and tribes all over the world. And what I found is that they live all over the world in different climates. They eat completely varied diets. In the Arctic, they eat whale blubber and meat. The Maasai tribe drink cow blood, raw milk, and consume a lot of meat. Then there's also tribes that live off of fruits, seeds, and nuts. And what was remarkable is they have no chronic disease. And it created this eureka moment in my head that perhaps my diseases, which nobody could explain, were being caused by the modern living of me living in New York City, working 100 hours a week, not exercising, and not eating good food. And over the course of about 6 months, I dramatically altered my diet to a much more ancestral approach, basically eating as close to nature as possible, with the least amount of processing. Foods that come straight from nature without excessive processing, excessive chemicals, synthetics, foods that don't rely on things that are produced in a laboratory. Gradually, all of my diseases started to go away and my eyesight started to come back. After about 6 months, when I went into the ophthalmologist, my eye disease was completely gone, and they had never seen that before. I'm one of the only cases alive of someone to fully reverse this disease. And if you Google this eye disease, it actually still says it's incurable.
My name is Vani Hari. I grew up with 2 immigrant Indian parents. When they came here to the United States in the 1960s, they wanted to adopt the American lifestyle. And so that's how I was raised, on fast food, on processed food. I wanted to eat what everybody else was eating. So I was in and out of doctor's offices for most of my childhood, trying to treat my allergies, my stomach issues, my asthma. It wasn't until my early 20s that I hit rock bottom, where suddenly I started gaining weight, I was very sick, started to feel very depressed, and then all of a sudden ended up in the hospital with appendicitis. And it was going through that appendectomy that eventually woke me up to this idea that I no longer want to feel this way. When I started making this connection with the ingredients that I was eating and how they were chemical and man-made, I decided to opt out of that system, and I'm going to a whole foods diet. And when I made that shift, everything changed. Not only did my skin clear up and my eczema go away and my asthma disappear, my stomach issues went away, I went off every single prescription drug I was on and started to realize a life that I never thought was possible. And I started a blog. When I started to share instances where I have felt duped by the food industry, that is when my blog posts started going viral.
There are a lot of toxins in our food supply. And I'd say that modern food science has basically gone on a tear for the last 20 years in helping restaurants and food companies make their products more addictive, more shelf-stable, more reliable, more homogeneous. And all you have to do is look at the ingredient label of a Chick-fil-A sandwich, which I believe has over 50 ingredients, most of which is not what you would consider a food. So it's not just the food dyes, it's the emulsifiers, it's the conditioning agents, it's the preservatives. We've been running the largest uncontrolled science experiment on humanity for 50 years because none of these things are properly tested.
Chemical additives help to feed our expanding population. Today we use thousands of them.
Big food, they have been surprisingly lax and lenient on what is allowed in our food supply. The FDA created in 1958 what's called the GRAS policy, which is the generally recognized as safe regulatory approach, self-certification. And the self-certification basically says that a company If they create their own laboratory-produced ingredient that's modified from nature, they can hire their own independent experts, they can put a stamp on it that says this is safe, and then it makes its way into our food supply in a couple months. If you contrast that to Europe, what they do is something called the precautionary principle. They don't allow new synthetic chemical ingredients in the food without up to 10 years of testing. They have far lower incidences of heart disease, obesity, chronic disease, lower cancer rates, 5 to 7 years longer longevity, and most importantly, they spend between half and a third on healthcare per person that we do.
Here in the United States, there's over 10,000 chemicals allowed for use, whereas in countries in Europe, it's only 400. Doritos, here in the United States, it has 3 different artificial food dyes and MSG, monosodium glutamate, which actually is given to rats in obesity studies to make them fat so they can test obesity drugs on these rats. Gatorade here in the United States has red 40 and caramel color level 4 that's linked to cancer, but in the UK it doesn't. Why are we giving our American children these extra chemicals that are harmful here in the United States when these food companies have already figured out how to reformulate their products without these ingredients in other countries using safer alternatives? Why is it citizen activists like me trying to hold these companies accountable? Why isn't it our politicians in Washington doing this work?
Many of the things discussed today, I think there is a nuanced debate. But with artificial food dyes, they have shown all over the world that they can use colorants that come from fruit.
This is the Canadian version.
This is the brightness of the Canadian version, just for visibility. And this is the brightness of artificial food dyes. Artificial food dyes make the food brighter, and they're cheaper, and they're more reliable. And they make it brighter so it attracts children. When kids are presented with 2 bowls of cereal, one is neon bright and one is more muted, they not only are attracted to the brighter one, they'll eat more of it. So the Kellogg's Fruit Loops in Canada has no artificial food dyes in it. It has colorants that are derived from fruits and vegetables. And you could see the stark difference in the colors of the Canadian version and the US version, which was basically neon. And what was so amazing about that was that most of the people in that room, including members of government, didn't even know that these companies make a safer, cleaner version for all these other countries. Because in these other countries, these ingredients are either banned or they require cigarette-like warning labels that says this may contain ingredients that is known to cause behavioral disorders and learning disorders in children. And so all of the big food companies don't want that kind of label on their food. And so they just voluntarily chose to remove it. Except in this country, we don't have that option.
The artificial food dyes. These food dyes are made from crude oil. It's literally crude oil. That's what the food dyes are. That's what makes the food neon blue or bright red. There's no nutrition or purpose for this other than the fact that kids love to see that food that's glowing. But according to the FDA, they're called safe because the FDA allows food companies to self-police. The food industry and the healthcare industry have built the largest lobbying organizations that have more scientists paid off to defend them than any industries in human history. So the tobacco industry was a massively powerful force in American politics. I think it was something like 8% of tax revenues in the 50s were from tobacco. It's a very culturally important product for America. So you had a huge political base and you had a similar dynamic where they had been able to buy off and just kind of own a lot of the medical establishment to where you had ads in the 1960s saying how doctors thought smoking was healthy. It's a very analogous thing to what you have with ultra-processed food right now. When the political pressure led the medical community to actually have a soul on this and actually say what was true, it did change behavior. So in the 1990s, the cigarette industry owned 40% of the US food supply. Once the cigarette industry bought ultra-processed food makers, they actually shifted their lobbyists from the smoking account to the food account, lobbied for the food pyramid, bought off the USDA Nutrition Guidelines Committee to where they essentially recommend ultra-processed food, and then ultra-processed food consumption actually skyrocketed as smoking rates went down. Interestingly, cancer rates also went up.
The tobacco companies shifted their focus. They started to buy the different food companies like General Foods and Kraft, and they shifted those scientists and those resources that they used to addict people to cigarettes to now to food. And so a lot of that technology is actually flavoring technology. And so this is one of the reasons you see either artificial flavor or natural flavor added to the majority of processed foods in the grocery store, because it's that flavoring component that triggers your brain into remembering that flavor and wanting to eat more of that product.
What's this? My nose detects something new that's delicious, so I must follow my nose.
And it literally takes over your taste buds and your entire olfactory system so that your brain can't stop eating and doesn't know when it's satiated. And then you end up overeating, and that's what ends up leading to these chronic diseases.
And that's what the problem with ultra-processed food is. When you look and see all those chemicals you can't pronounce, the problem is those chemicals are a science experiment specifically and explicitly designed to hijack our evolutionary biology and satiety signals to make us want to eat more. We are all getting sick from chronic disease and treating those diseases in silos, but those diseases are all connected by a poisoning of the American people. The United States is becoming fatter, sicker, more depressed, and more infertile at an increasing rate while bankrupting our country with medical costs. If those trends are not reversed, the American experiment will end. It's a civilizational issue.
We as Americans presume that our food is safe, and we presume that the government and the regulatory agencies are looking out for our best interests at all times. Because it's unthinkable that if it's on the shelf at a grocery store that it might not be safe. But in terms of the long-term damage and the chronic disease contribution that is coming from many of these synthetic man-made ingredients, we have no idea what we're doing. And we've become so overly reliant on this concept of pure science that we've thrown common sense out the window. Part of why we're here in terms of our chronic disease epidemic is that we've lost our North Star on intuition and common sense and taking care of each other.
I'm Dr. Kate Shanahan. I'm a family medicine doctor, board certified. And for the past 20 years, I have been trying to help my patients with the root cause of people's health problems. And around 2 years into my practice, I myself got really sick. I had to question everything about nutrition in order to heal myself. And that's where I discovered medicine took a wrong turn, with the idea that cholesterol causes heart attacks. And it has implications that affect every aspect of medical science, every specialty, cardiology, dermatology, orthopedics. It has implications that affect every aspect of our health, every aspect of our body. Cholesterol is a nutrient. Cholesterol doesn't cause heart attacks, but doctors believe that it does. So all of nutrition science has been fatally distorted because of this adherence to fear of cholesterol. And that's where we invite the seed oils into the conversation. So the thing that we learn as medical students is that saturated fat is bad. It raises your cholesterol. The fats that lower your cholesterol are the polyunsaturates, which are the ones in seed oils. But when I started thinking about knowing that the polyunsaturates are actually very fragile, prone to oxidizing, and when they oxidize, that's really bad. When you break a natural molecule, you turn it into an unnatural molecule that can be very toxic. But when you look at the chemistry, saturated fat is very stable, and it can even protect you perhaps from having a heart attack. So there was this disconnect, and I had to resolve that. And that was when I realized that I had been bamboozled.
So the rise in consumption of vegetable oils really is the biggest increase of consumption of any food product over the course of the 20th century. You have to understand, vegetable oils were new to America. They were not part of our diet until the early 1900s. Before that, like every Western country in the world, we cooked with butter and lard, period, and some tallow and maybe some suet, that's beef and lamb fat, but mainly lard, which comes from pigs, and butter. Then in the early 1900s, they figured out how to press oil out of seeds. It's really seed oil, it's not vegetable oil. You know, sunflower seeds, safflower seeds, cottonseed was the big one in the beginning. And initially this oil was used as industrial lubricants for machines. Then they discovered if they could put this oil, which was gray and smelly and disgusting, through a long process of like 15 steps, winterized, deodorized, hydrogenate, they got a product that smelled good and it looked like lard. Initially, it was developed by Procter & Gamble. They had the initial patent for this, and they thought they would use it. They were candle makers and soap makers, so they thought they would sell it as, you know, use it for candles and soap. And somebody said, let's sell this as substitution lard. So they did. They sold it as Crisco. And they told American women, give up your lard, the smelly, you know, smells and old-fashioned lard, and buy this new product that we scientists have made. Then came margarine, substitute for butter. That's also hardened vegetable oil. The oil itself, they couldn't figure out how to stabilize that. So not until the 1940s did they figure out how to sell oil in bottles, like Mazola oil and Crisco oil. And those products really became the staples of American kitchens.
You know the chief killer of Americans is cardiovascular disease, disorders and degeneration of the heart and blood vessels.
Something happened after World War II, the increase in toxicity and the change of fats that we thought were healthy. Well, there was a study done by a guy named Ansel Keys, and good old Ansel meant well. It was called the 22-country study. And the whole point was, let's look at these countries that have an increase in fat in their diet, specifically cholesterol and saturated fat. And we're going to see a correlation of heart disease. Well, it kind of didn't work out the way they expected. So they cherry-picked 7 countries, and the data just wasn't what it was, because the fact was the countries they let out were actually eating very high saturated fat diets like France and some others, and yet they didn't have the correlation of heart disease. Matter of fact, very low even to this day. But that turned the way our government bodies, protective bodies, looked at what fats were dangerous and what fats were healthy, right? So the shift was to these polyunsaturated fatty acids, vegetable, canola oil, soy oil. The fact is these oils are very dangerous because they turn rancid very quickly.
And when you look at the 7-country study, you do not see data tables, you do not see solid evidence linking saturated fat to heart attacks. You just see all kinds of random musings about what people in Finland who worked for the railway station used to eat for breakfast compared to what people in Japan would eat. It is not a rigorous scientific document. When the American Heart Association aligned with Procter & Gamble, that was really the beginning of a very profitable relationship that continues to this day. And ultimately, the American Heart Association got $1.75 million from Procter & Gamble, which is about $30 million in today's dollars. And that money was put to use creating what I call the mirage of evidence.
It really began in the 1950s. So President Eisenhower himself has a heart attack in 1955, is out of the Oval Office for 10 days. This is a public health emergency and there's no information. And this is a time when nobody knows what causes heart disease and everybody's in a panic. So Ansel Keys, his idea was that it was saturated fat and cholesterol. They would clog your arteries like hot grease down a cold stovepipe and give you a heart attack and die. This was called the diet heart hypothesis. Ansel Keys turned out to be this very unique individual. He was charismatic, domineering, called a bully, even by his friends. And he was very persuasive. He was the one who had persuaded Paul Dudley White, Eisenhower's doctor, to avoid fat and cholesterol was the right diet. So he was able to get his diet heart hypothesis implanted into the American Heart Association. He got on the nutrition committee there, such that the American Heart Association in 1961 issued the first advice anywhere in the entire world saying, avoid saturated fat and cholesterol in order to prevent heart disease. Ansel Keys' diet heart hypothesis grew and grew in popularity and was more and more adopted by really all the established authorities, especially the government, the National Institutes of Health. And so it just became the reigning diet for everyone. So once the American Heart Association had come out with this advice, they needed better evidence. They knew that evidence wasn't good enough. So they actually undertook a series of really ambitious randomized controlled clinical trials to see if they could prove Ansel Keys right. I mean, ultimately over 65,000 people were tested on his hypothesis. Does saturated fat and cholesterol cause heart disease? And in none of those experiments could they show that to be true. And that research just sort of disappeared. In reality, this huge body of evidence exists, but it's just been ignored.
I basically had to create a new body of research on how do highly polyunsaturated processed oils like soy oil and canola oil, how do they affect human physiology? What's in those bottles? What do they do to us? That took me many years. And there's 8 of them that I've defined that I've come to call the Hateful 8 now, just to help people know that there are 8. So we've got 3 C's, corn, canola, cottonseed, 3 S's, soy, sunflower, safflower, and then there's rice bran and grapeseed. And polyunsaturates will do something called oxidize, which means they will degrade. The molecules will change. So they change from something that nature made that could be good for our body to something that nature doesn't make on purpose, that our body doesn't need, that damage our lipoproteins, that turn LDL cholesterol and HDL cholesterol into little globs of toxic, inflammatory, unhealthy stuff that damages our arteries. And that's what causes plaque and heart attacks and strokes.
And then the next thing I learned about vegetable oils came from one of my sources at a top vegetable oil company, Loders and Crocklin. So this source of mine in this vegetable oil company, he says, well, now that we have these trans-free oils, they're not stable and they are oxidizing. That means they degrade into hundreds of oxidation products. And he said it's a huge problem because every fast food chain, Burger King, McDonald's, you name it, they're all using these oils. And these oxidation products turn into like a witch's brew, were his words. They get hard, like polymers, like hardened paint. And the workers were trying to scrape it off the walls. It was covering the walls. It was clogging up the drains of the fryers. The oxidation products were so unstable that when the workers took off their uniforms and they put them in the truck to go to the dry cleaners, they would spontaneously combust in the back of the truck. And this is what we're consuming. These oxidation products, they pass into the food, they pass into your body, and it turns out they seem to cause massive inflammation. Oxidation is happening even at room temperature. It happens with very little heat. And it happens because polyunsaturated vegetable oils, poly refers to multiple double bonds. So every single one of those double bonds in a molecule, when it's heated just a little bit, or maybe there's a little bit of sunlight that comes into your kitchen, those double bonds open up and each of those bonds reaches out and grabs an oxygen molecule. It binds to it. Oxygen, oxidation, inflammation. That's what happens. But the idea that any of these oils, canola oil or any of these oils, are safe to cook with is not true. So that's why they tell you to store oil in dark bottles, because even light will start this oxidation process.
Well, these types of fats, they go rancid very easily. And these omega-6 fats are very important in our cell membranes. So these rancid omega-6 fats that are very sensitive to heat come in and they go right where they should, into the membranes. But the problem is they're adulterated, as the scientific literature says. They're rancid. And what they do is they cause the cell membranes to inflame. They cause the cell membranes to really lose something called fluidity, which just simply means they don't function the way they should. So these bad fats are coming in and going where they should, but they're bad fats, they're adulterated. And that's why it's affecting the health of humanity. And by the way, in the mitochondria, that's where you make energy. These fats are so important in that membrane of the mitochondria, our powerhouse of the cell, that they disrupt how we make energy. So now we don't think clearly. right? If we don't make enough energy in the cell, we start to lose the detox capability of the cell. And now toxins build up in the cell and bad genes start to get triggered. So this fat change was a big mistake by humanity. And unfortunately, it seems like once something gets locked into government, it just doesn't back up, right? So fat became evil, especially saturated fat and cholesterol. And now we realize you can fry things in these saturated fats like tallow. Now, newer studies are showing that these fats are actually stabilizing to the cell membrane and even stabilizing to the hormone receptors, and they stabilize our cells in general. And they're actually really important for our health and, in fact, safe to heat, unlike these polyunsaturated seed oils.
The problem is, when you've been eating seed oils, your body fat has too many polyunsaturates. What does that mean? Basically, it's inedible to your cells. Your cells can't get energy out of it efficiently. So they burn just a little bit of your body fat, and they need to burn something else. So they go after sugar. Unfortunately, there's not enough sugar in our bloodstream, so we run out of sugar, and pretty soon, we start breaking down our muscle. You lose muscle mass. You also lose bone mass. Your body fat composition is changed. You have 5, 10, 20 times more polyunsaturates in your body fat than it can possibly use for fuel. And polyunsaturates, what do? When your cells try to burn them for fuel, they shut down the energy production. So basically, seed oils poison our metabolism, so we can no longer get energy from our body fat, and between meals, we get hungry. That's why we have an obesity epidemic. When you poison our metabolism this way, doctors will diagnose you with hypoglycemia, and they will tell you you just need to eat or snack more often. That is not the solution, because the cause is your damaged metabolism. That rewires everything about how our brain works. So we're in this state here where between meals we are stressed, and we feel stressed unless we get sugar. So that's a recipe for a dysfunctional relationship with food. That can start happening at age 2. All the polyunsaturates from the seed oils in the food supply change breast milk composition. Children now have too much polyunsaturates in their diets, so they can't burn their own body fat normally the way babies are supposed to. This is a profound change of human physiology. We don't feel normal unless we are consuming blood sugar raising foods.
Dr. Kate Shanahan joins us now. She helps the Lakers eat better, and now she wants to do the same for you.
In 2011, I started working with the Los Angeles Lakers. And I said, okay, well, we've got to get them off the pro-inflammatory oils. They prolong recovery time. We're going to shorten recovery time. We got to get them off fueling from sugar. We got to help them fuel with their body fat. We actually ended up showing that really dramatically in a couple of cases with the Lakers, where people recovered from injuries in like a third of the time that was anticipated. So all of medical science, especially nutrition science, I think just needs a big reframe.
People don't understand that cholesterol just doesn't float around our blood. It needs carried in a little vehicle called a particle. The more particles you have, actually, the more at risk you are for driving inflammation of the arteries and therefore heart disease. But that's irrelevant to your total cholesterol, meaning you could have a 400 cholesterol and have low particles. And people go, oh, okay, yeah, you're not at risk. Or the size of the particle matters, meaning smaller particles are more damaging and drive more inflammation because they can get into the lumina of the arterial wall and drive that inflammatory process because it oxidizes. So the fact is that the particle number, more is not better, and the size. So in this case, bigger is in fact better. The bigger particles are less damaging. So we need a test called an NMR test, and that shows the particle number and the particle size, which actually matters more than your total cholesterol.
Nature makes LDL cholesterol for a reason. Nature's LDL particles have a benefit. They feed our immune system, they feed our brain, they feed all the tissues in our body that need cholesterol for their cell membranes to function normally. If we zapped the cholesterol out of all the cells in our body, we would disintegrate into a liquid pile because cholesterol helps our cell membranes stay semi-solid. It just helps them maintain their integrity. So it's absolutely vital. It's so vital, in fact, that before a cell will divide, one of the key metrics that the cell looks for is, do I have enough cholesterol? And if there's not enough cholesterol, it won't divide. I think we should get rid of the term high cholesterol and change it to normal cholesterol.
With good nutrition, everyone's a winner. So choose good nutrition for today and tomorrow.
You look at the list of funders for the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association, the American Dietetics Association. They're all, major food companies, ingredient manufacturers, and pharmaceutical companies. When I first started doing this research, I thought, why is Big Pharma funding nutritionists? They have nothing to do with nutrition, that's about food. But they have a clear interest in keeping people unwell. If it turns out that you can cure yourself by eating a healthy diet, you no longer need all those medications. And that, unfortunately, is a huge conflict of interest for Big Pharma. And they also benefit from nutrition experts promoting the whole LDL hypothesis, that you need to lower your LDL cholesterol by reducing saturated fats, because Big Pharma, the only thing they know how to do, they have medication for, is LDL lowering medication. They tried to make medication that would raise your HDL, your good cholesterol, they couldn't do it. So they're not interested in that heart disease risk factor, even though that one turns out to be a better predictor of heart attacks. They can't lower your triglycerides, which are driven by carbohydrate intake, so they don't have a pill for that. So they're really interested in promoting a theory that fat and saturated fat are bad for health, because that's what they have pills for.
Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor. Ever since pharmaceutical companies have been able to pay for ads, that drives the medical guidelines. And that's where doctors get their information. So these days, the news cycle and the medical guidelines are heavily overlapping. Statin drugs that lower our cholesterol, they were really the first blockbuster medical drug. They were released in the late 1990s. Very shortly thereafter, the pharmaceutical companies were legally now able to advertise direct to consumer on TV. And so when these drugs first come out, of course, they are not generic, they are branded. And so they can choose their profit margin. So they make billions and billions of dollars every single year. Over the years, our guidelines keep getting more and more aggressive so that more and more people qualify to take the medication. So the number of people who qualify to be on a drug has gone from less than 10% of the population to now where it's nearly 40% of the adult population. When I graduated, an LDL number of 160 was considered normal. Over the years, that LDL number has been pushed down lower and lower and lower. Now, it's at 70 for people who are considered the highest risk, but they're considering pushing it down to 50 or even 30. No human being, unless they are starved, will have a cholesterol level of 30. There is no population that naturally has an LDL level of below 50, certainly not at 30. This is an experiment on the human race to push our cholesterol levels to these low levels.
The fact is it's not what people think. LDL has been demonized as the evil cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. I argue it's the most important cholesterol because it literally sits at the top of the hormone chain, meaning that we make all these hormones from LDL. So when it goes too low, we are in great danger. So it has great purpose, this cholesterol. But the problem is we have billions of dollars selling medications that lower cholesterol. If that worked, well, we would see an absolute shift in the numbers. Just thinking logically, right? Where you have, the number one killer in this country is still, in fact, heart attacks, and strokes. Wouldn't we see a shift with this miracle of statins and cholesterol-lowering medications? Well, we haven't. Why can't we shift? Why can't doctors look at these numbers? Because they're being told high cholesterol, here's the antidote. High cholesterol, here's the high LDL, here's the antidote. Right? It works real well in the system, but how's it working out for you and I, or the populace as a whole? It's not working out at all.
So our population average has dropped our cholesterol, has not stopped heart disease from being the number one killer. It's still the number one killer. The field of cardiology takes healthy people with healthy high cholesterol and turns them into patients by lowering their cholesterol, whether by telling them to eat more polyunsaturated oils that lower cholesterol or by giving them drugs.
When I'm educating doctors or the public alike, I draw a cell. My saying is you have to fix the cell to get well. What's the first step that we have control over, okay? Because the oil that you use determines the health of that membrane, right? It's like, so we all need an oil change and we can do it Monday. The oil changes, go back to the old way our grandmothers did. Go back to saturated fat. Don't worry about cholesterol in your diet. Seed oils, it's in everything. Here's the problem. Even when you go into a health food store, and you start reading ingredients, you'll see sunflower oils, safflower oils, and most of those are rancid. Everything people are eating, every processed food, every restaurant. When we go to restaurants, we tell them we're allergic to vegetable and canola oil, because that's typically what they're using. They're rancid, adulterated fats that make their way into our membranes and affect our health hormonally, affect the way we think, affect our energy process, and that is the dangerous effect, and we're all being affected. So even when you're shopping at these stores, so one of the things I always have to teach people is how to avoid these. You have to look at the labels and be able to look for these seed oils. Now, things like avocado oil, much better, right? Now you're seeing potato chips and other things fried in tallow, which is that saturated fat that we used to fry in. This is what our grandmothers used to fry in. So we're going back to that. Even restaurants now, they're doing their fried food in tallow. Restaurants don't make a shift, do they? Until enough people come in and say, we want pure olive oil, right? And by the way, you know, when you go to Europe, it's a very different story. They are not using these oils like we are in the United States. And these oils are absolutely devastating our health. Any better restaurant will say, okay, yeah, we can make that in pure olive oil, or we can make that in pure butter, right? So they'll make a transition. Butter is a very stable, saturated fat. It doesn't take heat as well as lard, but it's still much better. If you're going out to eat, you know, there's so many places that will do it correctly for you or already do it correctly. So we're seeing a shift, but the average person doesn't know.
I am Chef Mark Tarbell. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm just a hospitality guy. I'm a chef. I love wine and spirits and cocktails, and really I just like to bring joy to people. I have restaurants, a catering company, and a wine company. We do not use any seed or vegetable oil or any processed oil. With seed oils, I jumped right into the knowledge and study of it and found that there's really a lot of things that made sense to me as a chef. I just stopped eating them, I felt better, and I always use my body as the vessel for testing, and I want people to feel good when they leave. I'm just an observational person, I'm a practical, simple person. I started looking at the fryer we were using and how hard it was to get that varnish that was stuck on the back of the fryer, which was residual from frying. And then if a pan was, you were using canola oil or something, it would drip over the pan, you can barely scrub it off. And I'm like, okay, that's not good. And I'm like, well, that has to do something because it's not liquefying in an easy way in my body. And when you use something like coconut oil or avocado oil or olive oil or tallow, it's slippery. You know, it just comes right off. You can wash it. So, you know, for me, I use tallow, I use pork lard, I use schmaltz, which I love. We make a lot of stuff with schmaltz. We render our own schmaltz from chicken fat. And we use duck fat. We use coconut oil for all of our vegan and vegetarian people. We have a separate fryer for that. And mostly olive oil. I would say 80% all of our sauces and cooking and frying is all in olive oil. It's expensive, but I love olive oil. I've always loved the flavor, texture, and feel of it. It's really harder for me now because I really have to understand why I'm going seed-free. I have to read a lot, I have to study a lot, talk to experts and doctors. I felt it was important for me to do it as a responsible restaurateur and chef, but now it's becoming more a thing. You know, really it's becoming something you can put out in front and say, I am this, or I am that, or I am seed oil free. Communities are now really demanding it, so commerce comes into play. If you're not seed oil free, then maybe you'll do less business, you know? But I think getting the message out there in a way that's not political or threatening, because I think health is not political. I think health is health. And I think no matter where you stand, you should be for health.
So True Food Kitchen is the largest full-service, farm-to-table restaurant in the country. It was a few months after our investment that the company officially stopped cooking with seed oils. And transforming a restaurant from using cheap synthetic ingredients like seed oils to moving away from it is difficult because we still had a few ingredients that still had seed oils, and we had to do a 2-year audit to figure out where the remaining seed oils were. And you would be shocked at how difficult initially this is. We could not find a supplier that didn't have seed oil-free mayonnaise, so we had to make our own mayonnaise. We found things like dried cranberries. A lot of dried fruit is actually coated in seed oils because they want to prevent them from sticking to each other. So we looked around, we could not find dried cranberries that didn't have sunflower seed oil on it. So we actually had to get rid of them. And I will tell you categorically that in the short term, it is profit and margin reducing. It requires a very mission-driven, intentional leadership team to say, I'm doing this for society. I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this to make a statement. Unfortunately, in my experience as a businessman, there's not a lot of people that do that because it's really hard. It goes against how our society functions. And our society, as of American society, much more so than European, revolves around pure capitalism.
Diabetes and other mitochondrial diseases are now costing America more than our military budget. We are poisoning ourselves. And it's coming from, principally these ultra-processed foods. And what we're trying to do, and this President Trump wants us to have radical transparency and to incentivize companies like this one to switch to traditional ingredients like beef tallow. Steak and Shake just switched out. We're very grateful for them for RFKing the French fries. They turned me into a verb. This generation of our kids is the first generation in 200 years that is going to have a shorter lifespan than their parents. It's a moral issue. It's a financial issue. The healthcare costs are going to sink us. And the only way that we're going to solve it is by changing what we eat.
60 to 80% of everything in the average grocery store contains seed oils. The average person is getting 30% of their calories from seed oils. One French fry has as much toxicity as smoking one cigarette. When I say toxicity, I'm referring to a category of toxins called alpha-beta unsaturated aldehydes. Those are very toxic. They damage our biomolecules. They will damage our cell membranes. They will damage our mitochondria. They will damage our enzymes. They can damage our brain cells, any kind of cell in our body. Alpha-beta unsaturated aldehydes are the same exact family of toxins as you get from smoking cigarettes. If you eat a serving of fries, it's as if you smoked an entire pack of tobacco cigarettes. I think we can solve a lot of what's wrong with medicine by looking at chemistry, biochemistry, and how does the chemistry of our food affect the function of our cells. I think we have so many more answers than medical science is telling us. I want to get to the root of what is making people sick. I want every cell in your body to be healthy. And if you care about people's cells, you start to think about what is happening at the level of the cell. And that is where all of these medical mysteries can be answered. It's not that complicated. We have all the research that we need to solve so many of these huge, expensive epidemics. What we really need is better medical advice. But now we've got so many very popular movements where people have embraced saturated fat and animal products. What it takes to be able to do something like that in today's culture is to be the person who is willing to rebel against the oppressive, unhealthy culture that is trying to make you sick.
People are surprised when they say, what is the number one thing I should look for and give up in my diet for myself and my family? I'm like, it's the rancid seed oils. Learn how to go through a grocery store and avoid them in everything, because even in health food stores, you're still finding these rancid seed oils. They just gunk up our membranes, and when that membrane is gunked up by these bad fats, yeah, we don't feel good. Matter of fact, we become weight loss resistant. If you look at the studies, these bad fats, these rancid seed oils are causing people not to be able to lose weight. So the fact is we are causing hormone problems, which is leading to obesity, which is leading to diabetes, which is leading to all these diseases, even autoimmune, where people just don't know that these fats that them and their family, even oftentimes when they're trying to eat healthier, are being exposed to unknowing unless you become privy to them. And then it's easy to avoid them. It's an easy change. I say everyone can do this Monday. Just get these rancid seed oils out of your family's diet and watch what happens to your energy. Just simple as that. Watch what happens to your brain fog. Watch what happens to your anxiety. I promise you, you will see a change in your child's behavior, and let alone how well you think, just by getting rid of these rancid seed oils.
But then came a bright moment of discovery. A quarter century ago, and at long last, weeds had met their match. In great science, energetic people, and an uncompromising commitment to the future of the world. That's the simple beauty of Roundup. A remarkable story, well worth celebrating.
Yeah, look, so many of these toxins are coming into us via food from a chemical standpoint. We're spraying food with so many different chemicals, so many different pesticides, herbicides. What about the chemical glyphosate? We are all being affected by this chemical. Okay, what does it do? Well, one of the things it does, and it's been proven to do, is open up your gut barrier. And what does that mean? That means that undigested proteins are crossing from your gut into your bloodstream, and it's causing food allergies. It's causing hyperimmunity, autoimmune, I mean, all these things. And of course, there's links to the chemical in cancer. If people Google Nancy Swanson and glyphosate, you'll see graphs of different conditions from Crohn's, IBS, I mean, you name the condition, and you'll see this escalation with the chemical glyphosate that they started spraying in the late 90s. In these graphs, you see these conditions just rising like this. Why? Because it's not only toxic in itself, this chemical glyphosate, but it's making these other chemicals that we already have in us and exposed to even more toxic by allowing them to cross the gut barrier and the blood-brain barrier. So all of these problems we're dealing with just in our food supply.
This rich farming region produces immense quantities of food. Handling and processing foodstuffs is one of the leading industries of our Middle Western cities. When corn was discovered growing wild in the Western Hemisphere, it was not much taller than field grass. The full-grown corn stands higher than a man. Men have cultivated and improved it for hundreds of years, and today corn is one of America's most abundant and valuable crops.
If we dial back 100 years ago, we were starting to destroy the topsoil of the planet, in the United States in particular. And what we were doing is we were failing to do crop rotation, we were failing to respect the soil's need for feeding and composting and these age-old farming practices. And so our plants started to fail. And so our crops started to be prone to insects and fungi and viruses. And that led to the Dust Bowl. In this time of plenty that we have today, where we have the breadbasket of the world growing in our Midwest, it's very hard to imagine that that very same ground was dead and completely non-productive and led to this huge famine event in our own country. And so that, I think, is kind of the march of how we got to this convenience-based, chemical-based food chain that would really set the stage for the GMO era.
You know what's growing down on the farm? GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. Among the GMOs available in the U.S. right now, corn, soybeans, canola, sugar beets, cotton, alfalfa, potatoes, summer squash, apples, papaya, and pink pineapple.
So it's important to understand what glyphosate is and what Monsanto was up to. So Monsanto goes all the way back to Agent Orange in Vietnam, okay? Another defoliant. Could spray it on the trees in the jungle, cause the foliage in the jungle to shrink, so that way in guerrilla warfare, we're not as much of a disadvantage. The soldiers, it's known through Agent Orange, have gotten very, very, very sick. Well, the same company who participated in making that thing says, hey, we have another defoliant herbicide. It's herbicide called Roundup commercially, but glyphosate, the chemical, will cause foliage to shrink or to die.
Weeds, no problem. Kill weeds and grasses, roots and all, with a shot of Roundup. For driveways, patios, fences. Make weeding easy. With Roundup, nothing kills weeds better.
GMOs, genetically modified foods or crops. What would happen is Monsanto would patent a seed of, let's say, corn, and this corn would be resistant to an herbicide called glyphosate. So now if you're a farmer and you want to grow a bunch of corn, but you worry about weeds and herbs that come in that could have an adverse effect on your crop, well, now you can grow corn that's resistant to this toxin, this herbicide called glyphosate. You can spray the heck out of the fields, the corn won't die, and the herbs around it will.
So they developed Roundup Ready corn, and that corn, you can pour glyphosate all over it, and it will do nothing to it. And you hire one airplane, and they fly over the fields, they saturate the entire landscape with glyphosate. Everything dies except the Roundup Ready corn. And within a couple of years, 90% of the corn, 95% of the corn in the United States is now Roundup Ready corn. And then they developed it for soybean and for barley, for sorghum, for a lot of other plants. And then around 2006, they discovered that if you sprayed it on wheat late in the season, it would desiccate the wheat. In other words, it would dry it out. So all the wheat in our country started being sprayed that year in 2006 with glyphosate. And that's the year you saw this explosion of celiac diseases and gluten allergies and all of this stuff, and then severe damage to the microbiome. Because it's designed to kill plants, and there are structures in your gut biome that are critical structures in your gut biome which have plant-like metabolisms which are destroyed by glyphosate.
But the reality is your gut microbiome is not made from human cells. And the impact on that is the same impact it's having on the microbiome of the soil and everywhere else that it touches, and it's absolutely devastating there. You also have to understand that this is a water-soluble chemical. It's very toxic, goes into the soil, and it's gone into our water systems. And then you start to see, like the Mississippi, for example, where all drains there, and you start to see cancer statistics along the Mississippi, and you see they're startling. Very, very likely anybody in the United States who had a urine test today, they're probably going to find some glyphosate in it. It's almost impossible to avoid. That's how bad it is.
The reality is we have introduced into human existence now something that is ubiquitous with our day-to-day lives. An incredible statistic is only 0.1%, 1,000th of a percent of the glyphosate or Roundup that's sprayed worldwide actually hits its target. 99.99% of this chemical never reaches its therapeutic target of the weed. Every 6 years since the 1980s, we have sold twice as much glyphosate worldwide. Last year, 2 billion kilograms of glyphosate were used worldwide. 2 billion kilograms of a single chemical that would rob our soil of its nutrient and medicinal qualities. 2 billion kilograms of a water-soluble toxin. And once you dump this into the environment, it's going to go into the water table. It actually evaporates, it goes into our air, ends up in our clouds, rains back on us. So we create this whole ecosystem of toxin. What does that mean for human health? What does that mean for multicellular health? What does that mean for microcellular health on the planet?
When you're talking about pesticides, it's about how, the U.S. innovation has led to this abundance of food that's feeding the whole world, and we need to protect that type of innovation. We're on the verge of civilizational collapse, I think, based on our broken food system and the fact that we're getting so sick and the fact that the healthcare system profits from more and more sick Americans. Medical research is still a very trusted institution in society, and they can buy off that medical research. Once you have a scientific consensus that glyphosate is fine, once that has the stamp of Harvard Med School and the stamp of the NIH, then you have activated all these other gatekeepers in society to call anyone a war criminal for questioning that. So what these industries have done on both the food side and the pharmaceutical side, and what I saw and helped do working for these industries, is you have to get to owning the science. But the science is for sale.
I'm Carrie Gillum. I've been a journalist for more than 30 years. I spent most of my early career with Reuters International Newswire. At Reuters, one of my main jobs was to cover the agrochemical industry, and that included Monsanto. And over time, Monsanto became very unhappy with my reporting and spent a lot of time pressuring and harassing and trying to intimidate me and trying to control my work. What I learned through covering the company for more than 25 years was that it was part of a playbook to try to suppress any information from scientists, from researchers, from activists that would be detrimental to their profits and to their corporate agenda. To hear Monsanto tell it, this was the safest chemical that you could use in agriculture. It was so safe for people and pets, and you could spray it directly over your GMO crops, and it wouldn't be harmful to the soil, wouldn't be harmful to water or biodiversity. And that just wasn't the case. And researchers started paying attention. So they really started looking into it, and we're finding that it does, hurt the soil, it does bind in the soil, it does impact the environment, it certainly does increase weed resistance. It does linger and create residues in the food that we are feeding our kids. The goal really always was with Monsanto to confuse or hide or mislead the public.
Monsanto had essentially knew about the fact that its herbicide was causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or causing cancer in people, and they buried it. A legal team led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had taken this to court. He got the first case to court, and in the very first case, a groundskeeper named Dwayne Lee Johnson was the plaintiff, and the jury ended up awarding him $289 million.
This morning, fallout from a monumental verdict.
This case was historic.
Friday, a jury in San Francisco found biochemical giant Monsanto liable for former school groundskeeper Dwayne Johnson's cancer. Johnson says constant use of the household product Roundup led to his diagnosis of terminal non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Doctors have given him just months to live, the jury awarding $289 million in damages.
When we sued Monsanto, we had enough rat studies, enough human studies, we had about 10 of each, and we were able to go to the judge and say, we got enough science on this now to show that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is being caused by glyphosate. So those were the only cases we brought. But there are a lot of, really interesting studies that show links between injuries to children and the amount of glyphosate in a woman's urine and the mother's urine.
It almost gets to be darkly ironic. Bayer, a pharmaceutical company who has treatments that they sell to treat things like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, buys Monsanto, who creates a product that causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. One of the interesting things that people probably aren't aware of, and one of the things that I hear constantly, and I have personal experience with, is that there are people who are quote unquote gluten intolerant. They can't eat any gluten-based products. They can't eat things with wheat in them. They can go to Europe, they can go to Italy, eat the pasta there, no problem. They don't feel it at all. Why would that be? It's because the soil that it's grown in and the way that the crops are treated in that process is different.
So what's going on right now in the food supply is that genetically modified ingredients are mostly not still labeled. They're not disclosing what's going on in the food supply. And we are consuming very high levels of glyphosate herbicides in our foods. Most conventional foods, especially grains, peas, beans, legumes, will have glyphosate because it's allowed. And this is what is making America sick.
We have in the US what are called MRLs, maximum residue levels. And these are levels that the EPA sets as legal limits. So if you have this much glyphosate in an apple, for instance, and it's underneath your MRL, you're fine, it's legal. How do they set these MRLs? Well, what I came to find out is they set them pretty much at whatever the company selling the chemical tells them they should be set at. The company does the research to find out, how much is going to be left on the food, and then they work with the EPA and they set these levels. And if you look at a database of MRLs around the world, you find that the US consistently has the highest legal limits in our foods because the companies say they're safe.
Very low levels of glyphosate have shown to contribute to endocrine disruption, to cancer, to all kinds of harm. So really, according to the science, there's no safe level of glyphosate in our food supply. 0.1 parts per billion is what should be avoided, according to scientists. that would be the maximum residue level for all the crops. That's not the case. Peppermint has a maximum residue level of 200 parts per million. That's 200,000 parts per billion. Wheat has a maximum residue level of 30 parts per million. That's 30,000 parts per billion. Why is that? That's because of industry use. There's these super weeds that are growing in the cornfields, growing a resistance to glyphosate. So farmers are now taking 2 or 3 passes on the crop. The residue levels increase. So now you need to raise the level to 13 parts per million. And that's what Monsanto told the EPA back in 2013. And the EPA did that without any scientific evidence of showing that raising the maximum residue level is at all safe. So that entire system is fraudulent.
I mean, I look at this stuff as a weapon of mass destruction. It is, and not just destroying human lives, but destroying the microbiome of the soil, destroying everything that it touches, the water supply, etc. I mean, this is a massively weaponized thing that is sold for profit, and I still, for life of me, can't imagine how it's okay to still keep using it after all the information's come out, the court cases have come out, and I'm hoping that this new movement, that MAHA, is going to have an impact on suddenly getting the regs right and getting rid of things that are toxic and getting rid of the bad actors who've been lying about it for years for the purpose of profit.
The action step is we have to try to avoid these by eating cleaner foods the best we can. The first choice would be eat 100% organic, right? That's not going to happen perhaps all the time. Sometimes you end up out at places that doesn't have organic, and sometimes even in your home. Some of the organic foods you don't have access to, or they're very expensive. So then if you Google the Clean 15, those are basically the 15 foods that use less chemical and are dramatically lower levels of those chemicals. Or avoid the dirty dozen. Those are the 12 foods that have the highest levels of these chemicals. I think it's step one of avoiding these. So yeah, you can wash with some different vegetable sprays, but the fact is a lot of it is absorbed into the food itself. But I think the first thing we need to do for our families is avoidance.
What makes for America's record output? It's not only her natural resources, it's mass production, constant modernization of plants, and the search for new techniques.
After World War II, we have something called literally the chemical revolution, where companies started figuring out that they can manufacture chemicals and make foods cheaper. They can make all kinds of things like plastics, and I mean, this industry boomed to where we became the chemical leader of the whole world. And those chemicals are found in everything that we're exposed to.
Microplastics are in almost everything. When you drink out of a plastic water bottle, there's significant shedding of the plastic into the water. The inner lining of all cans, including soda cans. Most people don't realize that aluminum cans are all lined with plastic. Every single one. Most cardboard packages, like the Tetra packaging where you can get the shelf-stable liquids, those are also lined with plastic. And recent research has shown that we are consuming upwards of a credit card worth of plastic a week between all of these different things.
One of the new studies are finding plastic in every organ, cell, tissue in the body. Plastic is through our food supply, cosmetic supply, things that we're drinking out of. This plastic water bottle right here, 240,000 micrograms of plastic that turn into nanoparticles of plastic that are ending up in our tissues. Plastic is causing this massive hormone disruption. It blocks hormone receptors, it damages hormone receptors. Plastics mimic estrogen in your body. You can have low levels of real estrogen and your body thinks it's high levels, which interferes with the feedback loop, and we know it drives cancer. If you really know how much these bottles are doing, you're gonna give your kids a different bottle to take to school. Here they have many water bottles now from metal and different glass, porcelain. We don't have to drink from plastic. So do we need to avoid plastic? Yes. There is hope at the end of the day, but our job is to minimize these massive sources. Not completely, but do the best job we can as a family. And that starts with education.
Then the dentist makes something to fill the hole that will become almost as hard and firm as the tooth itself.
Our show today concerns every one of you watching who's ever had a cavity filled. Because if your filling is made with silver, it probably also contains the highly toxic element mercury. So why are dentists still putting fillings containing mercury in your mouth?
Silver fillings are 50% mercury, and that vapor comes off of those fillings for the life of the fillings. People can Google a smoking tooth video. That's a 25-year-old silver filling, and they show just the rub of a pencil eraser of mercury vapor coming off, right? So imagine what chewing or hot coffee does, right? That vapor is crossing into the brain. The number one source of mercury is still what we end up with from mom in utero. There's a study called the Drash study. It's a German study that it was one of the first to show the number of fillings in mom's mouth, those silver fillings that I was referencing, is proportional to how much mercury they found in the baby's brain. And that's an autopsy study, very accurate, because you can't measure, there's no test to measure brain mercury, and you can look what's in the body and be fooled because it looks clear, but it's really the mercury in the brain that's causing the problems with so many people today. The amount of aluminum that people are exposed to today is immense. It's falling out of the skies. Literally, they use a process to make jet fuel more efficient. So I know a lot of people look up and see these contrails. What you're seeing is particulate matter in jet fuel, more now than ever. There's some bromine, there's some aluminum, there's a concoction that saves these companies millions, if not billions of dollars because it makes the fuel more efficient. When you see that pattern behind the jet, those particles are creating a condensation. It's getting into our food, water, we're ingesting it. And these are neurotoxins. That means they go into your nerve system. The biggest nerve in the body is the brain. And we wonder why. We have a world full of people today in brain fog, trying to stimulate it out.
You cannot walk outside and breathe in most places without taking in aerosolized metals like aluminum. I wake up every morning just grateful that I'm alive and I feel relatively well, knowing what I'm exposed to. We're dealing with 10,000, perhaps, novel new chemicals. You have non-native EMF, right? Non-natural electromagnetic waves that are constantly bathing our cells. And now with 5G, those are even more concerning. So we are living in such a remarkable moment where we are exposed to unprecedented levels of adversity.
We are electromagnetic people, so we're very sensitive to electromagnetic fields. And did you notice, while we were all being locked down during COVID, 5G towers went up like mushrooms everywhere.
The electric field is the energy that comes off of electrical wiring. So when we plug a hairdryer into the wall, that electricity that comes up to power it has a pulsing electric field that can extend out 6 to 8 feet. That can attract and get onto the body, that can cause low-level stress, a whole range of different issues. The M part is the magnetic field. And the thing with magnetic energy is it doesn't get blocked very easily. It can go through walls, it can go through our skin, our body, and cause vibration and the low-level inflammation. The third part, the frequency fields, the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, the cell phones, any of these things that are transmitting data wirelessly over the air, these are all frequencies that our brain and our body is using to communicate. When we overlay these other frequencies from cell phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, it's interacting with those frequencies and causing a lot of interference.
There's high probability that chronic exposure to electromagnetic radiation over time is going to have an adverse effect. We just can't say exactly how much or how long. How many people are sleeping with that phone next to their head all night? How many kids, it's like an appendage, they don't let it go. My admonition to people is, hey, detach from that radiation for parts of your day. Rather than be baking in the Wi-Fi in your house all day long, you can just put a switch and say, you know what, at night, everybody's sleeping. Why don't we let our bodies recover? Let's shut the Wi-Fi off and take some of that stress out of the system and allow our bodies to heal, recuperate, and regenerate. Start thinking in terms of how do I give my body some moments of relief from this radiation that's ever present in my experience.
We're cutting down trees at a rapid rate. We're producing things, we're using plastics. We breathe more microplastics than we do drink it. So when it comes to outdoor pollution, you're thinking smog, it could be wildfire smoke, pollution from cars. Like, where do you think all that rubber on the tires goes when you're driving? It's not on the tire anymore, it's in your air. So all those outdoor pollutants come inside your home. But then indoor, you have a new host of indoor pollution. All the chemicals that we're using, the hairsprays, the air fresheners, the cleaning products, the fire retardants on your furniture, the toxic paints. So since the 1970s, there's been a huge movement towards energy efficiency. So that's keeping our building envelopes, keeping our homes very tight. So what that means is it can't breathe. So if your home can't breathe and you're trapping all those toxins and chemicals inside, well, put it this way, the average indoor air is 5 to 10 times dirtier than outdoor air, and humans are spending 95% of our time inside.
Mold is another one of these toxins that exists in the environment that can cause weird, vague symptoms that you can go around to many doctors, get all kinds of tests. Nobody's really looking in the right places, but you can't function. You have brain fog, you have loss of energy, you're disoriented, you don't know what's wrong. And the reality is you had exposure to mold. That mold has accumulated in your system's not detoxing it fast enough, the consequence of which is now you have a chronic illness. You can't support your family. If you're a student, you can't pay attention at school. The ripple effects and the impact is horrible. What's happening for a lot of these people is they go into the standard medical system, doctor sees them, looks at their symptoms, gives a diagnosis, and then puts them on pharmaceuticals, trying to manipulate your chemistry to reverse the symptom, but not really finding out what's the root cause here that's causing all this in the first place. And these drugs are toxic in and of themselves. So now we have a toxicity problem, and we're adding more toxins into the system as a solution, and then the person ends up in a really compromised situation. So that's where there's literally a huge industry now that's emerging, where there are different types of doctors who are aware of the things that I'm talking about right now, and they're creating diagnostics and testing and protocols and then systems for detoxing that help these people in profound ways.
We're all under a chemical attack in this country, and we need to start fighting back. We are in the midst of an epidemic. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and old. Young adult cancers are up 79%, and 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall. And 500,000 American children are on SSRIs. No other country has anything like this.
The last 20 years, we've had an absolute onslaught of toxins. It's toxins that are driving the problems that we're seeing. If we remove those causes, then we can get people well. Heavy metals, mold, biotoxins from these things accumulating in our tissues that store up over 20 years. This isn't the last 5-year problem. This starts in utero. This stuff bioaccumulates, builds up over time and accumulates in our cells. And then the detox pathways go down and down and down. And now every little bit of plastic, all the things that we are being exposed to from our personal care products, what we're washing our clothes in and our dishes, and we just wake up every day going, gosh, can I make it through this day? When we've accumulated toxins at the cellular level, that's the cause. If we deal with that, we'll get our lives back.
Leading authorities have made several studies which indicate that the concentration of fluorides in the public drinking water supply shows no effect on the prevalence of bone fracture. In fact, the truth is that controlled fluoridation does no harm to any of us.
Fluoride is a type of a chemical called a halogen chemical. They block thyroid receptors, and it's similar to chlorine, but fluoride is even worse. The fact is, this debate's been going on for years, and there should be concern. Where did this history come from? 1945, there was a Midwestern town in Michigan, and they put fluoride in the water.
The children in Grand Rapids have less tooth decay than they did 6 years ago, as much as 65% less.
They noticed that, hey, we had less cavities, so this is great. From that, they called it a success, and then it started going in the water systems around the world. But here's the problem. something else called dental fluorosis started happening. That means this modal effect happens in the teeth where you start getting gray spots and lines and even black horizontal lines in the teeth of areas that had higher levels than others. So it raised some concerns. So they started, of course, decreasing. But what they didn't realize is that there was other problems happening too. But even before 1945, you have to understand where it came from. So this aluminum industry, Alcoa and others, in the process of making aluminum, fluoride was a byproduct that was ending up in the water in some of these towns. It cost the aluminum industry a lot of money to deal with this toxin. Colorado Springs became this hot spot where the kids' teeth were turning this gray and black color, and they realized it was because of the fluoride in the water. Not every water system in the country is putting fluoride in, but most are. There is these pro-fluoride people, like the ADA, the American Dental Association, and there's this group that has been against fluoride in water and being used in dental offices for many years.
Well, I got into the topic because on GreenMedInfo, there's a whole database now of fluoride research in terms of all the adverse effects that are being caused by fluoride exposure. Because of course we're told by the dental industry and dentists that this is essential for our teeth, and there is truth to the fact that sodium fluoride applied topically can strengthen like the enamel. That said, anyone can go and get toothpaste. They don't have to have it in the drinking water, and the form in the drinking water is not sodium fluoride. It's actually an industrial waste product, and it comes from basically the phosphate industry here in Florida for the fertilizers. There's this byproduct that actually contains radionuclides in it, even metals, and that is not what we are being told. Like basically we're being told this is just good for our teeth. It would be terrible to take it away from people, and people that want to choose to do fluoride and use it could take as much as they want. Like we're all about freedom first. That said, we shouldn't have our government advising it to be put in the water when we know that it's causing a lot of harm.
I dove into the world of oral care and took a very big interest in it in 1998. And that was the year that the Food and Drug Administration mandated a poison warning on toothpaste with sodium fluoride. And it says, and I quote, "Keep out of reach of children. If more than a pea-sized amount is swallowed, call poison control immediately." It is a toxic halide chemical.
Yes.
There is enough fluoride in a general commercial size of toothpaste to be fatal to 2 children under 5.
Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Wow, time for Crest Sparklemania!
In 1988, one of the major toothpaste manufacturers, Procter & Gamble, launched a product called Crest Sparkle. Had sparkles in it and it was bubble gum flavored. It tasted like candy. Fluoride fatalities went up. There were estimates of 280%. Mothers going into the bathroom, seeing their child dead on the bathroom floor. So the FDA was forced to, they had to. They did it, it took them 10 years because they found that sodium fluoride is toxic. Dentists are brainwashed about fluoride. Now let's talk about what fluoride does, because everybody's like, you need fluoride, you need fluoride, you need fluoride. Number one, fluoride is not a nutrient. Myth number 2 about fluoride is it doesn't make your teeth and bones stronger. What happens is fluorine is the most negatively charged non-radioactive element in the periodic table. What does that mean? Your teeth and bones are made of something called hydroxyapatite. So when you introduce fluoride, it quickly converts your teeth and bones from hydroxyapatite to fluorapatite. Fluorapatite is harder, like that glass.
Yeah.
You can't scratch it, it's harder.
So it makes it look like you have harder bone.
You have harder bone. You actually see x-rays of fluoridated teeth and it has this thick white enamel that looks great, but it's brittle. It's 33% weaker than natural teeth and bones. And what's put in the water supply over here is hydrofluorosilicic acid. They have to wear hazmat suits in New York City to dump this fluoride into the water.
Yeah.
It is a industrial waste product. We have non-fluoridated communities with lower rates of decay than fluoridated. So it does nothing. The special interest groups that support this practice. There's very powerful money behind keeping this barbaric practice and keeping communities from having clean water. The real problem is you are medicating an entire population without their consent.
2011, the EPA lowered the amount that is allowable in water. I believe down to 0.7 milligrams per liter. They lowered it down. And that's happened many times through history. Why does our government body keep lowering the allowable amount? They're reading the literature and there's concern. The public has a right to know that there's research out there showing that this causes bone cancer, especially in young boys, lowers IQ in children, right, and causes hormone disruption. Recent study this year in Journal of American Medicine showed that the higher levels in fluoride coming through a pregnant mom's urine, we had more neurodegenerative problems, meaning brain development problems in the child being born.
You cannot control the amount that people are getting, and you want to know the truth? Over 60% of adolescent children between the ages of 7 and 11 have fluorosis, damage to their teeth.
Absolutely.
And what do the ADA tell dentists to say? Oh, that's a benign condition and it's just a cosmetic defect.
Yeah.
No, it's actually hypocalcification that makes teeth more prone to decay. Over 62 studies now showing fluoride lowers IQ in children. California Supreme Court just called it an unnecessary health risk in children and pregnant women.
Bone cancer in boys.
That was Harvard University, a research project at Harvard University. Osteosarcoma in male children between the ages of 7 and 11, when their growth endings are most active. Osteosarcoma, really a fatal bone cancer.
So we see the more fluoride, lower IQ, more cancers, more thyroid problems, and also the drugs in the water. Your neighbor taking their estrogen or their anti-anxiety meds, we're finding that in the water that we're drinking. Where I live, I get the report and it was all safe to drink. That water looks healthy. Well, I tested the water. I tested for things they weren't even testing for, right? But again, I was coming up with even different heavy metal levels than they were, right? So my water was not safe to drink at all. Oh, and they're not testing for forever chemicals. It's in there, right? It's like all these things are in the water supply. They're not testing for drugs when you get that report. Oh, it's in there too, right? So the fact is that we all need to be drinking clean water and it's affordable to do so. So we need to filter our water. I believe every family should have an RO system to get rid of fluoride, because reverse osmosis water system, you get these things for $300 now. You can buy them at Costco. You can buy them at Walmart. They have on-the-counter units, they have under-the-counter units, but either way, everybody should be filtering their water.
Fluoride was harming fetuses and harming young children. And the federal court, after reviewing a study by the National Toxicology Program, came to the conclusion that it was an unreasonable risk to fluoridate our water because it causes a demonstrable IQ drop in children. It is causing neurological harm. And so I'm very happy to say that towns and states around the country are saying, no, we're not going to fluoridate our water. Fluoride in the United States was not causing any less tooth cavities, which was the rationale for it. In Europe, they really didn't fluoridate in the same way, and they had the same burden of cavities. So obviously there was something else going on, and I think that's going to be over.
I think fluoride is a poison. My son was in the hazardous waste industry, and he had taken an exam, and that if a fluoride truck crashes on the highway, they have to clear the highway for miles around, and people come in Tyvek suits and respirators and gloves to do the cleanup. And it's a toxic byproduct of certain chemical process and oil industry process. And for many years, those industries, it was costing them thousands of dollars per drum to get rid of them. And then they came up with the idea, why don't we put it in the water supply? And they did that, and it causes cancers. Of course, it causes your bones to deteriorate, and it causes severe IQ loss. And last week, a group that I'm associated with won a 7-year lawsuit against EPA on fluoride that I think will result in the fluoride being removed from all the water supplies in this country.
Utah is poised to become the first state to ban fluoride in public water systems. The bill would prohibit adding the tooth decay fighting mineral to any public water supply and repeal previous fluoride-related laws. The move comes as Federal Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. has criticized fluoride use, linking it to various illnesses. However, major medical groups, including the American Dental Association and CDC, continue to support fluoride.
I'm very proud of Utah. It has emerged as the leader in making America healthy again. They've led the nation in banning fluoride. It makes no sense to have it in our water supply. I'm very, very proud of this state for being the first state to ban it, and I hope many more will come.
Robert F. Kennedy is going to make an impact here.
Yeah.
And by the way, he's catching a lot of grief about this fluoride topic, which again, if anybody just took the time and looked into this, they would say this is probably one of the greatest experiments gone wrong in human history, and it is tragic, and he's yet getting grief.
Absolutely. You know, the irony is that I remember, in the 80s and the 90s, he was hailed as a hero of the environment. And so now he's working on the inner environment. He's working on the environment in and on our bodies. I think it's time for doctors to get out of the chemical business.
Yeah.
But I think, when you speak about make America healthy again and the flack with that and this and that, I think we're in a historic time in the history of the world where truth is going to win over lies. I'm hoping we could set millions upon millions of people, not just in the United States, but around the world, free by giving them the facts and by stopping the censorship of that intelligent scientific exchange. It reminded me of when Copernicus said, the Earth isn't the center of the universe, we revolve around this big ball called the sun, and the Pope put him in jail. Throughout history, this kind of ignorance has existed, but I do believe people are being set free with the truth.
In the end, health is a philosophy. The bottom line is that we're dealing with a philosophy that is very unnatural, meaning man and the mind of man is superior to nature, and that we can manipulate nature to serve our purposes. And that's a very misguided philosophy. We live with nature, we live in nature. Aristotle said nature does nothing uselessly. Ayn Rand said in order for nature to be commanded, it must be obeyed. But when you try to manipulate nature, like putting fluoride in water, and expect that you can do that without consequences, it's a very ignorant and dangerous thing to do. So it's just crazy. We can't eat fish out of our oceans because we polluted it. We can't drink water out of our tap because we polluted it. What are we doing to ourselves? We're literally fighting with both hands tied behind our backs, walking into this modern environment that all of these great thinkers and scientists have created for us because they know so much. It's really created an untenable situation. What about the people who have not the disposable income, that are having to buy their foods with all the seed oils in them, having to drink the water that's got all the toxins and chlorine and fluoride in it, that have to go out into the world and try to navigate it based on what becomes affordable to them, and then look at our healthcare system, look at the money we spend on it. You can't spend your way out of this with a bad philosophy. The philosophy is wrong, the fundamental premises are wrong, and the fact that we spend over $4 trillion per year and we're getting sicker with more and more chronic diseases. The philosophy and approach towards health that we have and had held for these past years is not working. It's making us sicker, and no amount of money can fix it.
If you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
When President Trump was shot in Butler, I had a spiritual feeling that the country has changed. When he put his fist up, it couldn't get out of my head that President Trump was probably going to win the election. And it flashed in my head that Bobby Kennedy has marshaled the most successful independent campaign in modern American history, but probably just mathematically couldn't win because he wasn't even probably going to be able to get on all these ballots because of the lawfare.
So I introduced Callie Means and Bobby Kennedy in 2023 because I felt what they both focused on related to food and pharmaceuticals, it would be a great match, and so they started going out and speaking together. So Callie Means calls me up on the same day that they attempted to assassinate Trump, and he was asking me, should I call Bobby Kennedy to see if he'd like to work with Trump? You know him better than I do, and propose this to him. And I said, well, if you don't make that phone call, I think you're going to forever regret it.
So I felt an urge to pick up the phone, and I called him, and I suggested potentially he should call President Trump and talk about unity. He was thinking about unity too. He connected with President Trump that night, and I think a bond really developed between these two men, and it was genuine. They talked about making the childhood chronic disease issue a preeminent topic in the campaign.
Robert F. Kennedy.
When Bobby walked on that stage the first time in Phoenix and endorsed Trump, it was one of the loudest applauses the Trump campaign ever heard. Bobby brought something to President Trump, and President Trump believes in this issue, has really empowered Bobby. It's beautiful, and we've got to keep that political coalition going.
If I'm given the chance to fix the chronic disease crisis and reform our food production, I promise that within 2 years, we will watch chronic disease burden lift dramatically. This is a spiritual journey for me. I reached my decision through deep prayer, through hard-nosed logic, and I asked myself, what choices must I make to maximize my chances to save America's children and restore national health? I felt that if I refused this opportunity, I would not be able to look myself in the mirror, knowing that I could have saved lives of countless children and reversed this country's chronic disease epidemic. Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country and our children is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.
You know, I'd been director of communications for Robert Kennedy Jr. as he was running for president. At the moment that he joined President Trump, we sat down in a small meeting, and President Trump said to Bobby, I believe you can end this chronic disease epidemic. I know you've been fighting for our kids our whole life, and I want to give you the opportunity to do that. Now, as the CEO of MAHA and trying to really help build this movement, I don't want this to be a political organization. This isn't a Republican issue. The health of our children is a bipartisan problem. As Robert Kennedy Jr. said in the speech where he suspended his campaign, we've got to love our children more than we hate each other, which is one of the most important lines I think ever spoken in political history. And he said, President Trump has given me the opportunity to make Americans healthy again. I remember hearing that and saying, oh my God, that's brilliant. The speech is going viral, and everybody on their own, not prompted by us, it wasn't planned, just was sharing the speech and typing hashtag MAHA, M-A-H-A, Make America Healthy Again. The movement started on its own. MAHA essentially was born. This combining of these two powerhouses, crossing the divide to find common ground, to work together, is one of the most dynamic moments that's ever happened in political history. And it happened because of MAHA.
Well, I'm just so thrilled. I'd connected Donald and Bobby back, I think it was 2015 or 2016, with this big dream of them being able to work together to expose what was happening within our medical system and to be able to protect more of the people. Unfortunately, at that time, it all fell apart. So for me, being able to massage those relationships with, my two friends, I'm very close with my former husband, my daughter's father, President Trump, and been friends with Bobby for maybe 20 years also. So for me, I saw the strength and felt the strength in both of them, and I realized that they really were on the same path, of they really wanted to help humanity, and they want to bring heart and soul into, helping beyond politics. And with Bobby being able to step into this position now, to me, a dream come true. I've never felt so much joy. It felt like we are in a place we are really going to live. So with Bobby being there now, already he's making so many moves that I think we're going to hope that the next generations will be able to have cereal without artificial colors and dyes and sugars. We'll be able to understand the beauty of drinking water that's clean, of looking up in the sky and going, wow, I really can see nothing but blue skies, and doesn't it smell so fresh? we have a chance to really live in the earth the way that I feel God created us to live.
How can you not be excited that the entire country is now motivated to address these issues? Because we have a ticket right now. We have a ticket to real change at the highest levels of government, and it's a real testament to what can happen when there's true leadership on these issues.
Today marks the beginning of restoring the trust at the FDA and our regulatory institutions. From the moment my kids were born, I have taught them the truth about artificial food dyes because our government was doing nothing to protect them from these harmful ingredients. Because you made your voices heard, we now have made history together.
And I want to commend the food companies for working with us to achieve this settlement. And there's so many conflicts that we are now systematically eliminating. So for those ingredients that we can't ban legally, we're going to start informing Americans about what they're eating to make sure that we have adequate labeling so mothers who go into the grocery stores know what is good for their children and what is not. It's not the time to stop. It's the time to redouble your efforts because we have them on the run now. We're going to restore gold standard science so we know what's in our food and we can eliminate it. Thank you all very much.
That toxic soup that our children are now being put in harm's way of on a daily basis, everything they eat, everything they touch is filled with poisons. Our regulatory agencies allowed all of those toxins into our environment and looked the other way because of the corporate interests that were involved. And now for the first time ever, we have someone that has fought the corporate interests and fought for human beings and citizens of this country every day of his life in Robert Kennedy Jr. And now he is in the most powerful position in health in the world. As Secretary of Health and Human Services, MAHA is the agenda. It is an agenda to get to the bottom of this chronic disease epidemic. And as he said, to put it all on the table. And I think if we show that that's all that's happening, that you're going to bear witness to the greatest scientific investigation that has ever happened in a nation. If we just take one step at a time, deliver the science that's necessary, and choose no sides, eventually, slowly but surely, those people that were afraid of Robert Kennedy Jr. are going to recognize, oh my God, he's doing what I always thought had been done. Robert Kennedy Jr. is working on laws that allow me to take that information in and make a choice based on being informed. And so as we wean people off of the lies and deceit from the pharma-driven legacy media, and as we watch Robert Kennedy Jr. deliver the science that we believe and know should have always happened, I think you're going to watch a transformation. And when the history books look back, they're not going to say, oh, that was because of Donald Trump. They're going to say, that was the moment the people woke up. MAHA was a movement of the people, one of the most powerful movements the United States of America ever saw. It changed politics as we know it, and it brought our nation together on one dream, one hope of making our children healthy again.